I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Omid Malekan, crypto genius extraordinaire. Your book is the best book I've ever read about Bitcoin. Re-architecting Trust, The Curse of History, and the Crypto Cure for Money, Markets, and Platforms. We've been promising to talk about this book for several sessions in a row, but now I've read it and we finally get a chance to talk about it. So welcome on the podcast once again.
Thank you, James. And that's quite a compliment coming from you because you've been in crypto for quite a while now, and I'm sure come across lots of crypto books.
Well, what I like about this book is that, A, you explain from the ground up the history of money, and we'll dive a little deeper into that because there are some twists that I didn't expect. And you show how Bitcoin is a natural evolution of money. And many authors, including myself, have done this before, but I like the very unique stance you take, and it kind of underlines why Bitcoin is not only a natural evolution, but a necessary evolution. And you're able to explain all of these complicated things, ranging from DeFi to decentralized autonomous organizations to what a store of value is, all these complicated things that people have trouble with, but you do it in a very simple manner. It's very easy to understand. So all together, as a people should read this if they want to really understand what Bitcoin is with a capital B, and what cryptocurrencies are, and potentially what the future, what direction this is going. But of course, I have questions.
Please, let's get into it.
So one thing you really explain well is the relationship, and I never really thought about it this way, although it's kind of obvious in hindsight, is the relationship between trust and money. Like all through history, I can't give you something in exchange for a product or service unless I can trust that I can use what you give me to turn around to someone else and buy another product and service. I have to trust that what you give me has basically similar value to what I'm giving you, what I'm selling you.
Yeah, the funny thing about money is perhaps more than anything else in society, it is primarily a trust-building mechanism. It exists because without money, a lot of people think about barter economies. There are two theories as to the origins of money. One is that, well, there were these barter economies, but they were so unbelievably inefficient because, like, everyone has to price everything in every good, and you don't know what to like. Do you store in grain or do you store in wine? And what's like the price of labor, and how do you convert that to land? The funny thing with money is it's so old that nobody actually knows what existed before it. It's prehistoric in that sense. The other theory about the origin of money that I would speculate is more likely to be true is the credit theory of money that says there was no barter, just because barter can't really scale. Instead, people did favors for each other. Like I'm going to work for you today, and you promise to give me something in exchange for it tomorrow. Or I'm a farmer. I need a tool to be able to plant seeds. So I'm going to get that on credit with the promise that when my seeds result in grain, I will give the person who sold me the tool some of that grain. So that's a trust-based system entirely now. And the problem with that is that really doesn't scale across time or space. So money was probably invented as a clearing mechanism, or a way to like settle trust. Like instead of all these promises ranging between different people in a community, they just occasionally pass some physical object or increasingly bit of data. And that allows them to introduce trust into every other economic activity.
So let's talk about the physical object, because that's how it started. Like, let's say a metal. So you're going to sell me a pair of shoes. You make shoes. You're going to sell me a pair of shoes, and I'm going to give you a little piece of silver for it. And that's arguably like the first kind of, I don't know, like money platform. Or it was probably precious metals like gold and silver and bronze and so on. And even there, you need to trust that if I'm giving you silver, that the silver isn't just silver on the outside and like nickel on the inside or something. And so it's not that trust is built into the system, is that lack of trust is built into the system. Like everybody who accepted money had to buy a scale so they could weigh to make sure that 1 ounce of silver equals 1 ounce of silver.
Right. And that it's like introduces two problems to every negotiation. You need to negotiate on the deal, and then you need to negotiate on the money. Which was the perfect setup. And by the way, the scale thing is this is something you can see in the names of many of our modern currencies. So in biblical times, there was a unit of weight called the shekel. So like Abraham paid some number of shekels of silver to buy a burial plot for his wife. And today in the state of Israel, the currency is the new shekel. In Roman times, there was a popular standard of mass called the Libra Pondo. And that's where we get everything from the Italian, or formerly Italian, currently Turkish lira, the French livre, the British pound, even actually the hashtag symbol goes back to that. But this was a fundamental problem, which led to one of the earliest and most important innovations with money, which was to introduce standards. And the simplest way to create a standard is to make a coin. Because now if you say, well, this is a gold coin or a silver coin, and it's generally agreed that it has X amount of silver, it becomes a lot easier to do business. But then that raises a question of who should issue that coin, because it wouldn't work if everybody just issued their own coin.
Right. Or although even if this is why counterfeiting was punishable by death back in the Roman Empire. Like if you made your own coin with Julius Caesar on it, and you said, oh, this is the whatever, and it was really forged because or fraudulent because you had inside a different kind of metal, you could be put to death.
Right. And even before then, there's this fascinating thing with the history of money that for convenience reasons, society decides to make a trade-off, but that trade-off then changes the trust framework. So it would be very convenient if everybody in the economy just trusted a single coin, right? So then who's going to issue that coin? Well, it should be the leader who, among other things, has the power to put people to death, has the scale to build the mints to create the coins, and then is going to put their face or likeness on that coin as sort of like a stamp of trustworthiness. That works, but the problem with it is this recurring theme throughout history, which is that it puts the issuer in a position to become a free rider. Because now the issuer is like, well, I'm issuing these coins, everybody's using them, they kind of have to. If they don't, I might kill them or punish them otherwise. But what if instead of making them 100% silver, I make them 95% silver, right? And then the other 5% I keep for myself. And that introduces the manifestation of a loss of trust in a currency, which is inflation. And history has been full of it, usually because some trusted issuer of a coin starts diluting the content to finance a war or imperialism or something.
And no one ever really makes the coin stronger. Like they never put more gold in the coin.
Right.
And even up to modern days, like, look, what's the reason we got off the gold standard with Nixon and Bretton Woods is because we couldn't really finance the debt of the Vietnam War using the gold we had in the ground. So we had to take the dollar off the gold standard. It's hence the inflation of the 70s. But which again is all about trust. Like some group of people probably trusted that Nixon would never do that, and some people trusted that it would be okay if he did that. And that debate still rages on. But and it goes beyond even money, because I never thought about this too. You have this quote in the book that contracts are dumb, and it makes sense. Like if you and I make a contract, like, oh man, I'm going to pay you $50,000 up front, and you're going to build my house. You could take the $50,000, and if I, let's say I made a bad deal and I just wire it to you up front, like, oh, I'm happy to pay you up front, and then you just walk away. We had a contract, so sue me is the common phrase people say, because you could break a contract. You just have to be willing to be sued, and so that's part of a contract. Actually, is that you're willing to be sued if you break it, and so contracts themselves. You think, oh, it's a binding contract. It's not really binding because you have to go to a court to bind it. And I mean, you're in New York City right now. The eviction courts are overflowing because so many people are just staying in their apartments without paying right now. But it doesn't matter. They all sign binding contracts. Contracts are made to be broken. But this starts leading up to crypto or smart contracts, is that those contracts enforce themselves, which I never thought about smart contracts in that context, but that's part of money, because almost every contract has to do with money. I would say every contract has to do with money of some sort.
Yeah, you can even take almost any kind of financial product and say that, what is it? It is a contract that has conditions that result in the movement of money. So, whether it's a landlord deal, but think about like a bond, right? What is a bond? You give someone money, they give you interest, and then hopefully they pay you back someday.
A cup of coffee, a menu. I see it's a cup of coffee is $4. That's kind of a contract in a very simplified sense.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, until the invention of blockchain, there were two problems with contracts. And mind you, like in a broad historical context, contracts were an amazing innovation, and there are fascinating tidbits in the book about like the kind of crazy stuff that people would do even to prevent someone from changing the text of a contract after the fact. But all contracts have a problem of interpretation and a problem of execution. So just because two people agree on the language doesn't mean that their interpretation will always be the same. A lot of what the legal system does is try to figure out which interpretation makes sense. And ultimately, all enforcement, like you said, is done after the fact. Right? You trust that somebody doesn't break the contract, but they can. And then when they do, you have to go to court and sue them, and that costs money and takes time. The innovation with smart contracts, which admittedly is not the best term, because actually most blockchain contracts, they're not like your lease agreement, right? They are conditional payments that say, if X, Y, and Z happen, then this transaction will result. But that's a very powerful innovation because, one, smart contracts are written in code, and in code, there are no interpretation problems. There might be bugs, but like you can find them ahead of time. And then the execution happens in what we discussed in the previous discussions, in trustless fashion. So if you and I use a smart contract to facilitate some interaction between us, could be almost anything, then one, there's no room for different interpretations because code is code. And then two, I don't have to trust you and you don't have to trust me and we don't have to trust the middleman. The trust framework of the blockchain will monitor the conditions, and then when they trigger, enforce what the contract said, which usually means some asset gets transferred from you to me or vice versa.
So you've in just the past few minutes, you've mentioned some huge institutions involved with making money and essentially enforcing money. Money is basically just the mechanism by which contracts are not enforced but executed. So a contract is executed when the money changes hands and the product for some product or service. So you've mentioned you need a leader who has the financial resources to mint lots of money and distribute it and kill people if there's counterfeiting and invade countries if their supply of money is dwindling but the other country has more money, and kill you if you don't pay your taxes to support the mechanism of government. And then you need an entire judicial system, lawyers to write contracts that can't be misinterpreted, judges to decide when there's a contract has been broken, and then police to then enforce, the execution of a contract if the party still won't execute, and then jails in some cases to further enforce. So this basically all of society has been set up not because money is trustworthy, but because money and contracts have not been trustworthy. These are all risk ways to reduce the risk of money. So basically, the way to reduce risk is to have a strong army and the ability to use it on your own citizens, a strong police force, great lawyers and honest lawyers, and great judges, again, great police, and all accountants and banks and so on in between to kind of handle the moving of money from one place to another, or the counting of money in the case of taxes or profits or whatever. So you need these gigantic trillion-dollar, multi-trillion, quadrillion-dollar institutions to basically have money. All of this is just set up so that I could buy a pair of shoes from you.
Yeah, pretty much. And you just did a good job of explaining a lot of that architecture is really old. Like the way so much of the existing financial system is designed is not that different if you go back certainly 50 years. In some cases, 150 years. Right? Like electronic payments were originally innovated by Western Union, which was, people might not know, at one point the biggest telecommunication company in America because they had a national telegram network. And it wasn't that long until someone was like, wait, if we can send electronic messages across the nation, we can do payments, right? One person goes to a Western Union location, deposits $10, and then a telegram, beep, 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 says, all right, across the country to the other Western Union branch, we'll give the recipient $10. We got the money. That's how most fintechs work. They might use cloud technology and AI and some other digital services, but the architecture is exactly the same. What's interesting about a lot of different blockchain applications for money and payments and DeFi and everything is that this is a digitally native architecture. It's just a more sensible way to build trust in a world where everybody has a smartphone and everything runs 24/7 and we have software and we can automate so much of our financial activity.
And I think this is something people don't really understand is the order, and this is what your book explains very well, is that the order of things wasn't government first, money second. It turns out it was money and transactions first and government second, basically to enforce that entire infrastructure. And that's a little bit simplistic. I don't know if it's 100% true, but a lot of people say, oh, it can't be money unless a government accepts it as taxes. And that's like the wrong direction of looking at it. Like, we're paying the government taxes in order to set up the infrastructure to basically monitor our money.
Indeed. And
not the other way around.
And if you spend some time reading up the history of money, the one thing that you learn is that it's very dynamic and it has evolved drastically over the years and sometimes very differently in different places. So I think it's very ironic that when this question comes up of like, is Bitcoin money? And I spent some time on this in the book because a lot of central bankers will come out and say like, Bitcoin can't be money. Money is, fiat currency that's issued and managed by a central bank and backed by the asset side of their balance sheet. How money is structured today. The irony of that claim is that design for money, as you alluded to earlier, only goes back to the 1970s. So here you have a human creation that's been around for like 10,000 years. We are currently using a version of it that's been around for 50. And you have these central bankers saying, well, it can never be different again, right? Bitcoin can't be money because it's not what it is today, which then I asked the question, like, is there anything in human history that the way it's been for the 0.01% of the years is the only way it could ever be ever again, regardless of technological or social progress?
Well, let me ask about that because yes, the nature of how government controls money has changed, but has there ever been a time when there was a money or a currency that wasn't backed by a government?
Yes, there have actually been many instances of that, not so much recently. And by the way, there are good reasons why you would want a government to be in charge of a currency because the hardest thing to do with any kind of money is to get people to trust it. So it actually helps that you have governments that, assuming they do a good job, which is a big assumption, but assuming that they do, they're doing things like managing the supply of it. And every currency requires its own network effects. So one way to give a currency network effects is to make it legal tender. Legal tender means that people have to accept it for the resolution of contractual agreement. Governments can also collect taxes in a currency. They pay their salaries in their currencies. And I wouldn't diminish the importance of that because the one area where I disagree with a lot of other pro-crypto people is they want to throw away 10,000 years of history, or at least the last 50 years of it. And there are important reasons why the monetary system evolved to be what it is today. But there are these, even in modern times, there are these interesting examples of times where there's money that a government is not involved. One of the assignments we give my students in my class is a famous account of the kinds of money that World War II prisoners developed in POW camps because there was no other money and they needed something. And alternatively, the machinations around gold, silver, right? Even the history of government issued fiat money is very rich. There have been times where governments have issued very hard money that they say our money is gold, period. We just will turn it into a coin. There have been other times where governments say, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to hold some gold, and then we're going to issue paper receipts against it. And then sometimes they say, you know what, forget the gold. We're just going to go with the paper receipts. And then in many instances, the paper receipts ends up becoming highly inflationary and worthless. And then that government says, okay, we're going to go back to gold now.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, Shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues to or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. I even saw on Twitter today, which is, of course, a fount of factual and rational information. So I always go there. Someone said all money is a form of debt. And that's just simply not true. Like, as you mentioned, like hard money, like gold, someone saying this gold is now official money, that's not debt. This is the gold. It's the money. But a dollar bill, though, traditionally, at least initially, was an IOU from, let's say, the US government. Hey, I owe you $1 of gold, but I'm never going to pay it to you. Just trust me that this is worth $1 of gold.
Yeah, even today, actually, a dollar bill say Federal Reserve note on them. It's still debt. It's just debt that's backed by a promise of the central bank not issuing too much and keeping certain assets backing it.
I wish I had a dollar bill actually on me right now because there are so many bullshit things on a dollar bill that indicate that we're scared to death that people won't trust it. Like if you think about it, there's George Washington. Supposedly he never lies, so he's the most trustworthy human who ever lived. And then there's like all these symbols. You know, there's the signature of the treasurer and the secretary of treasury, and there's all this imagery of that this is legal tender, and it's like written in this great font. And then on the back of a dollar bill, there's an eagle with the flag. And there's, but if you don't believe in that, there's also a pyramid with an eye, which for some reason makes people trust it. Like what's the pyramid with the eye for?
I actually don't know. It's a good question. I do know that it says "In God We Trust," and this varies.
Right. So just in case you don't trust George Washington, you gotta trust God.
You gotta trust God, and this currency somehow goes back to God. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and it's all about trust, right? In England, they still have the Queen's head. It used to say like redeemable.
Yeah, in every country.
Yeah, and this goes back to ancient times, and even like the first, one of the first metal coins was a alloy of gold and silver issued by the ancient Lydians in present day Turkey, and that had like, I don't remember if it was the stamp of the leader or a lion or something. So all of this goes back to this idea of trust. But the point I try to get across in the book is that trust by definition or by history is cyclical, because the more trustworthy anything becomes, could be a currency, could be an institution, could be Twitter, by the way, which I do delve into the book of the decline of trust in social media. The more trustworthy any framework becomes, then the greater the incentive for somebody else to take advantage of it. That there is this ultimate free rider problem, that if you have a currency that is very trusted by everyone, then the incentive grows for the central bank or the issuer to just inflate it. Ergo, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet has gone parabolic since the financial crisis, because everybody trusts dollars, right?
Well, if you think about it, like all the big institutions we mentioned earlier, the quadrillion dollars worth of institutions have all been corrupt at some point or other. So, or not corrupt, but at least not trustworthy. So in the book, you refer to something called seigniorage, where governments used to, spike their gold coins with some other metal when they wanted to devalue it. Or the U.S. government when they printed up $4 trillion in 2020. Then there's this court system which mediates on transactions or contracts. There are plenty of examples of corrupt judges that could get bribed to give a certain result. There's also been corrupt police who get paid off to allow certain illicit transactions. There's corrupt accountants who steal the money you give them to manage it and pay the IRS. They pay themselves. I'm not saying all people are bad, but I'm just saying this has occurred many times. And not only that, then when I send you money, there's so many intermediaries that all take a fee in the middle. There's this natural inflation in the system. You mentioned last time that the global payment system is a $3 trillion a year system. So there's all this both bullshit and inflation built into a monetary system, a global complex monetary system like the world has now and will always probably have.
Yeah, and all of these are institutions of trust, one way or another. The central bank, the payment intermediaries, the stock exchanges, and ultimately the fees that they charge for that they provide is the cost of trust. And we pay that fee because it's better than not, right? Like obviously.
Right. So we pay taxes, which pay for a lot of these institutions. We pay local taxes, which pay for the police force. We pay for accountants. We pay for lawyers. We pay for mediators, and on and on and on.
Right.
We pay for Visa and Amex and payment systems and so on.
Exactly. Which then begs the question, there's the payment. That's one problem, right? The payment is okay when things are going well, but then what happens is that the exploitation of trust eventually reaches a point of crisis. So in a currency, that's when you hit the point of high inflation. In a financial system, it's a financial crisis, right? Like what happened in 2008 globally was a collapse in trust in intermediaries, which happened because we trusted them too much. If people had been more skeptical of the Lehman Brothers of the world, then they never would have gotten to the point where they could have collapsed the entire financial system.
And it's so funny. The thing that stopped the financial crisis was not that all of a sudden we trusted the Lehman Brothers of the world, but we simply changed the rules back to what they were before, which is that there's FASB, I believe it's FASB 157 was the specific rule, which basically changed during the financial crisis, and they changed it back. And it basically said, okay, we're sorry, Mr. Bank. You can now value your assets however you want, once again, as opposed to accurately valuing it, which is what caused the financial collapse. Most people don't know that one rule being changed and then changed back completely bookended the financial crisis.
Yeah, good point. And so there's the government doing something at the expense of what you could argue is like the trustworthiness of the overall system going forward. And the other way that the financial crisis was brought to a halt was with quantitative easing and low interest rates. So the US and many other governments decided to violate trust in currency in order to preserve trust temporarily in the banking system. And in some ways, we've been paying the price for that ever since. And it's no coincidence that Bitcoin and blockchain and the whole thing comes out of that era, because certain innovative, creative people went and looked and said, wait, there's got to be a better way to build trust. And what I try to argue in the book is that in many ways, this is what the crypto and blockchain approach represents. It is that better way that takes into account all of the lessons of history and the fact that technology enables new ways of building integrity into a financial system that didn't exist before.
And what blows me away actually is the way you I say you because you explained it, but the way cryptocurrencies, or let's say Bitcoin combined with Ethereum, integrate money as both a payment system and a contract system. When actually, as when I finish your book, they're the same thing, really. Like every payment is essentially the fulfillment of either a simple contract or a more complicated contract, and it bakes the enforcement into it. So it wipes out the need for all these institutions that we've been kind of led to believe for a gazillion years that we need them in order for money to work.
Yeah, and let's take it a step further, right? Here in developed countries in the West, whatever gripes you and I may have about the fees that intermediaries charge and what happened in 2008, at least there is a system and it works most of the time, right? Part of the reason we've achieved so much prosperity is because of the viability of the financial system. There's this counterintuitive idea that like people often in art and literature associate banking with like oppression and evil, but really it's the lack of reliable financial services that keeps people poor. That's why if you go to any market where there's a decent enough financial system, there's a high living standard. There are many countries in the world that don't have a financial system, and they may not have it because they don't have a good legal system. The fascinating thing about something like Bitcoin is, to your point, you get all of those things in one. You get a currency, which could be used as a store of value or medium of exchange, and you get a payment system, and you get a legal system. Because given the whole Bitcoin design, if I go and I want to send you some coins, the blockchain and the ecosystem provides all these assurances that that transaction will happen, even if there is no bank and even if there is no government around. And I think that's a remarkable achievement for the something like 2 to 3 billion people in the world that don't have access to reliable financial services.
So, okay, I buy into all this, and let's say there are some open questions like, will Bitcoin be the winner in terms of which cryptocurrency? Let's say there's a basket of cryptocurrencies, but which ones will be used as a payment system? Which ones will we use to save money? You know, sometimes that's called a store of value. Which ones, like Ethereum, will be used to make smart contracts, and so on. And you discussed this a little in the book, but I'm going to be a little bit of a skeptic now. You know, there's all these cryptocurrencies out there that have different specific use cases. So, for instance, LVMH, the fashion clothing, purse, scarf maker, whatever, they put this cryptocurrency called VeChain in Givenchy bags so that they put a chip with the currency on it or with a token on it.
Right.
And if you have a Givenchy bag, it's real. It's not, you didn't buy, if you buy it in Chinatown from some street vendor, it's real because it has one of these chips with VeChain in it. And the VeChain blockchain can't be, blockchain for various mathematical reasons can't be forged or faked. But my question is, so people buy and sell these, and I'm using VeChain as a specific example, as why do those have value? Why do these why aren't they just software projects? Why is VeChain also sometimes considered, and again, I'm just using this as an example, there's thousands of cryptocurrencies out there with different use cases, but they all seem to be traded like currencies. Is VeChain, should it be traded like a currency?
I actually haven't looked at VeChain in years, but the last time I did, it was actually what we call a permissioned blockchain, meaning it wasn't as open and decentralized as something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which when that's the case, I'm always like, just make a database. Don't do away with the pretense of a currency
Yeah.
and a token. And that's valid. I think the one thing people should keep in mind is that this is a new industry. So every project should be treated like a startup, even Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is 12 years old now or so. That's not that long. Like, how old is Amazon now, right? Amazon's what, 30 years old or something? And it's still like mostly looked at as a newer
It's
company.
probably about 25 years old.
Yeah. And most of the other coins out there are a lot younger than 12 years old. Like, they might be 5 years old, 3 years old, 6 months, whatever. Almost by definition, in any industry, the vast majority of startups will fail, particularly the first phase, when there's so much that hasn't been figured out yet, like the proper economics, the proper model, and in many cases, society might not be ready. So while I support all the experimentation going on, all the crazy stuff that's going on in crypto, I think it's important to remember that ultimately these are startups and there's a lot we haven't figured out yet, and we're only going to figure them out because people will try things and fail. And then new innovators will learn from those mistakes and build better things.
Right. But like in the case of, I could use VeChain, I could use many other coins, but I'll stick with this example. There is some value there because it performs a function that people are willing to pay for. Like, I'm willing to pay a little bit extra on the price of a Da Vinci bag if I know it's real.
Yeah.
And I know it's real because of this coin. The coin itself, I don't know what economics back it to give it value other than like maybe you can use it to then buy a bag. I don't know. Or whatever other use cases it has. Maybe you can use it for those use cases. But I do start to wonder, like, why does anything have value other than let's say Bitcoin and Ethereum? Like, I need to buy Ethereum in order to create smart contracts. I need to use Bitcoin because maybe that's the payment system. But everything else, can it be just built with software using a blockchain? Like, can I just make, if I'm a company, I'll just make my own private blockchain to do some function. Like, let's say I want to transmit healthcare data around. I could use some public blockchain, or I can build my own blockchain that doesn't have a currency associated with it, and everybody just uses that.
I agree with you. I am actually something of a source of value maximalist, meaning like you have to really go out of your way to prove to me that some digital currency actually has a source of value. And the simplest way to do that a lot of times is someone comes in and says, I have this blockchain solution, blah, 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 and it has a coin. I will ask them, well, will your solution work if you take out the coin? I actually believe I once asked this question to a biz dev person from VeChain, and not surprisingly, he didn't have a good answer. And that doesn't mean the technology is bad. It doesn't mean the cryptography is bad. It just means that you don't need a coin.
No, it doesn't even mean the value of it is bad. Like, it might be that there's enough demand. Like LVMH, for instance, has to buy VeChains for every bag they make. But and they decided to do that instead of making their own internal system. So that makes VeChain have some value. I hate beating up on VeChain because I actually think it's a really innovative coin and idea. But it really applies to everything. Like Render is a token which uses decentralized computing to render 3D graphics. Disney used it for instance, rendering the opening of Ant-Man and Captain Marvel. And you have to buy render tokens to use it to render graphics. So there's some value, but it's not necessarily currency value.
Right. And actually, now that we have stable coins, right, we have fiat currency on the blockchain, and it's wildly popular. In fact, it's really like beyond Bitcoin, arguably like the first killer application of blockchain is moving dollars around the world and giving people access to dollars that they didn't have and enabling programmable dollars, which is very cool. So there are also solutions where it's like, could you just pay dollars? And if you could, and in some cases it might be preferred, you should. Where a solution needs a coin is if the existence of that coin is fundamental to securing that solution. So we could not run the Bitcoin network on dollars. The fundamental trust framework of Bitcoin is built on this idea that miners spend money in their local currency, fiat currency, and then they get paid in Bitcoins. So their incentives are aligned. They want the price of Bitcoin to go up or at least not go down. And there are other kinds of applications where this circular math is important. You need a coin, it needs to have value because that's what gets people to do what you want them to do. There are also other situations where you say, well, that's suboptimal because coins are volatile and pure coins and difficult to comprehend. So I think we're going to see more and more projects that say we use some version of this technology, but to the extent that fees need to be paid or someone needs to be rewarded for providing a service, they will be paid in a stable coin.
But to your point, though, is that I might not trust the stable coin is ultimately based. Let's say the stable coin for the US dollar is ultimately based on the value of the US dollar. So I still have to trust, whether the central bank and Congress is making appropriate laws and policies around the value of the dollar. Whereas with Bitcoin, the economics of Bitcoin are in the code. So I don't have to trust any humans. So again, I don't have to go through the banking system with stable coins, but the value of a stable coin is still based on this free rider issue, whereas there's various institutions in the middle can decide, oh, we don't want the value of the coin to be this, we want it to be that.
Yep. There are actually two. One, you have to rely on the issuer. So if you own a dollar stable coin, you're trusting that the Fed won't inflate it away, which it kind of has been. You also, most of the stable coins are designed because they're backed by a reserve of cash in a bank. So you're trusting that reserve to exist. You're trusting the issuer to not do anything fuddy-duddy with that reserve, like, go gamble it away or buy Bitcoin with it or something. And you're trusting that they won't deny you access, because with a stablecoin they can. With Bitcoin, it's purely censorship resistant. Nobody can deny anyone access. But with a stablecoin, actually all the big ones have mechanisms in place to comply with laws and regulations, where you might own $1 million worth of a token, and then the issuer might say, James, we're freezing your tokens or we're confiscating your tokens. So I agree with you. There are many ways in which stablecoins are suboptimal. But there are other instances where they're not. And to me, what actually matters is the infrastructure, right? Like stable coins cannot exist without a decentralized blockchain like Ethereum. And Ethereum would not be decentralized if it wasn't secured by a native free floating currency like ETH. So one way or another, you're going to need both.
This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. the future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. One problem that the stablecoin solves that the dollar doesn't solve without the stablecoin is the smart contract issue. So stablecoins allow you to take dollars and use them in smart contracts. So it solves kind of half the equation we've been talking about earlier. There's kind of like, we trust it has value as a currency, but we also now make contracts smart instead of dumb. So stablecoins, we can't trust the value of the currency, but we can use them now as smart contracts. And Ethereum is essentially a programming language to build smart contracts. So as an example, let's take insurance. Using Ethereum, you can make an insurance company. So let's say you want to insure that there's not going to be a hurricane that destroys your house. And you buy that insurance smart contract with stable coins, and now it's in the blockchain. And now some Ethereum-powered blockchain sees on the map that your house has been destroyed by a hurricane. It triggers the smart contract, and money is automatically released to you. So there's no insurance company, there's no judges, there's no paperwork, there's no calling for months, like, where's my money? It's just automatically happens on the smart contract. Do I really need Ethereum for that? Or I could just build an insurance company with my own blockchain.
Well, but then if it's your own blockchain, it's not truly trustless. It becomes trusted in some ways. And there are private blockchains. In fact, a lot of big companies have plowed a lot of money into private blockchains. We haven't seen much as far as adoption is concerned. And compared to what we have today, in many ways, a private blockchain is better. It's just not best.
But like, here's an example. Like, I could be wrong, but like Walmart, for instance, uses Hyperledger Fabric, which I think was developed by IBM. It's like a private blockchain, an enterprise blockchain, and they use that to track supply chain. They don't use Bitcoin to track their supply chain or some other currency. I believe they use this enterprise solution made by IBM.
Yes, they do. And it's a network that them and their partners, like the trucking companies, run together, which again is better than whatever was before, which actually, knowing how retail works, was probably like people with paper clips faxing each other forms or something. But that's a very limited use case, and you're eliminating a lot of the appeals of what you get from a blockchain, like the fact that they tend to be global, censorship resistant, omni asset. I think that's a very big one. What you mentioned about stablecoins being programmable, that gets really interesting when programmable dollars exist on a platform where you have a whole bunch of other things. Could be stocks, could be gold, could be NFTs, all in tokenized form. And now you can use smart contracts to automate how these things interact with each other, which from an innovation and trust building perspective is revolutionary. Can Walmart on its private...
But what do you mean? Give me an example.
So the dream of any financial system where people are trading one thing for another, like dollars for stocks, is what in traditional markets they call delivery versus payment. In crypto, we call them atomic swaps. Simplified as, if you own something and I want to pay you for it, then you will only get paid if I pay you. It's guaranteed that way, right? Like think of like, the cartoonish way of two people, one's trying to hand the other one money and the other one's trying to like get the necklace, right? Thousands, maybe not, but hundreds of years of financial innovation has been built around this idea of like, how do we guarantee that trade, that either both people get what they want or no trade happens? And the banking system goes through a lot of loops to try to arrange this, but ultimately it ends up happening only if you're like, well, we trust the New York Stock Exchange and its clearing system to make sure that happens. On Ethereum, you can literally write a line of code that this token will go from you to me if and only if that stable coin goes from me to you. And this is going to be very transformative because counter to the theme that, crypto is all like Wild West and dangerous and risky, this is a way to build safety into the financial system. It's a way to build resilience into the financial system. There are so many crazy things that can and do go wrong, like in 2008, where, for example, people stopped doing business with Lehman Brothers because they're like, I don't know if they got the money that they need to pay me, right? Like maybe I sell them something and they don't pay me. So
this is such a great point because, like, if it's a private blockchain built, with some homegrown software, like software made by any company, there might be hacks and bugs and, like Microsoft Windows, there might be some vulnerability that was just discovered last week that, so all your Windows systems are breached. And Ethereum's got like 1 million developers on it, is battle tested over the years. Like people are complaining now, oh, the Ethereum 2.0 is being delayed. It's being delayed because they're literally making it, the smartest developers in the world are literally making it perfect. And, that's something that if you have just a private blockchain, any one private blockchain might have problems. And not that Ethereum won't have any problems, but there's multiples of additional developers working on it all around the world, testing it, and so on. Now, IBM's Hyperledger might be perfect, but maybe Microsoft's blockchain solution might not be perfect. So if you kind of simplify this with something that's the most tested blockchain that everyone uses and is trusted, you solve this issue of having to trust thousands of different blockchains.
Yeah, and even if it's not bugs, IBM could just turn off their solution, or they can deny anyone they want access to their solution. That's actually why they keep it private in the first place, so they can control it. So from a developer's point of view and a user's point of view, there's a lot of risk about going on any kind of private solution. Private blockchains, sure, but really like every other thing on the internet, right? We've talked before about like being canceled off of Twitter or having your bank fire you because you were dealing in penny stocks and they didn't like that. When you enter this blockchain domain And say you're an innovator, you're an entrepreneur, you want to raise money and put in a lot of sweat equity and build an application of some kind that people will use. Would you rather build it on a platform run by a corporation that can kick you out, or be compelled by the government to kick you out? Or would you rather build on a decentralized platform like Ethereum where nobody has the power to kick you out?
It's really interesting because it's kind of like the evolution of Linux. So if people don't know, there was an operating system called Unix developed by AT&T, which basically ran the internet for decades, starting in the 70s. And that evolved into this open source software called Linux. The problem with Linux is it was open source. So you couldn't just call up a company to fix it like you could with Unix. You could call AT&T. So, but other companies became like front ends to Linux. Like if you needed help, you would call a company called Red Hat and they would fix your Linux issues. And so I sort of see what's happening is instead of me calling IBM to buy their Hyperledger project, maybe I'll call IBM to say, look, I need help using Theta and Render and VChain with this solution I have. Can you work it out for me? So I'm not dependent on them giving me a bug-free coin, but I'm dependent on them just helping me build a front-end interface to it, like the easier part, really.
Your example is actually, your analogy is even neater than you might know, because Hyperledger is a sister organization of the Linux Foundation, and it was founded on the same principle.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so most of the internet, as you said, runs on free open source software. Why? Because it's decentralized, it's transparent. We wouldn't want to all like use an internet run by Amazon or Microsoft, because then again, they could fail, they could turn it off, they could censor, they could start charging for it. Blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum take that idea to the next level, because now it's not just data, but stores of value and contracts that are riding on there. And I agree with you. I think in the long run, most people will only access this infrastructure through a corporation or some kind of a centralized service provider, because there are many things about dealing with a blockchain directly that suck, for lack of a better word. There are many frictions and many headaches and risks, and the UI UX is terrible. However, I do think all of that will be built around the public permissionless blockchains. And I think actually the IBMs of the world will eventually regret investing so many resources on the private blockchain implications and not the public ones.
Well, it actually will follow the complete path of the internet. Like first IBM invested in their own private networks. Like I think CompuServe might have been a partnership between IBM and like Sears for some weird company that they were partnered with to make like their own private internet. And then ultimately they gave up on that to participate in the internet. And then ultimately, I think actually IBM bought Red Hat or VA Linux.
They bought, yeah.
Like, so yeah, some one of those companies. And so I think the analogy will be correct. So let me ask you this though. This is the big question. Well, first off, there's still a lot of people just saying these things have zero value. But as you've explained last podcast and this podcast, there's value there. But of course, people could choose to ignore that value and continue the same old ways they've always done things and hope for the best. What will be the catalyst where people finally say, you know what, we need this trust in our money. We need this trust in our contracts. We need this money in the way we account for things, with this, public ledger system called the blockchain. What are going to be the catalysts where people finally say, I don't want to hear, nobody says the internet is a fad anymore. And people were saying that up to 2005. What are going to be the catalysts where people stop saying this is a fad?
If I had to limit it down to one, it's actually going to be time. I think it's just going to take time for some of this to get normalized. And we're seeing it. Like, I think Bitcoin is actually, less people are saying Bitcoin is a fad now than 5 years ago. Now those people are saying NFTs
I'm willing to say Bitcoin's a fad though.
Yeah.
I'll say Bitcoin's a fad because it's not clear to me that this is a payment system or a store of value. Like maybe I actually think I'm maybe, I hate to say it, I'm almost like an Ethereum maximalist compared to the Bitcoin maximalist, because Ethereum actually has value. I can't make anything without Ethereum. Theoretically, I can use Bitcoin, but that hasn't happened. Ethereum's the winner there. I agree with you, but I could make the claim that Bitcoin still hasn't reached a tipping point yet.
Yeah, and I think we're going to need to see developers build different ways for average people to interact with this technology that abstracts away a lot of the complexity. Because there's still too much complexity, there's too much technical jargon, there's too much to be scared of, right? Like this idea that as much as I believe in a key-based custody model where you can hold all your assets and you don't need to go through a bank or a financial institution to use them, that's not going to scale from my mom. Right? My mom's not going to like generate a private key and back up her seed phrases and be like, okay, my life savings is.
She's not going to get MetaMask as her
Right.
wallet.
Yes, no, exactly. So we're going to need companies, actually, centralized, traditional companies, to figure out how to abstract away all this complexity. And we're seeing some early signs of that. And then we need to see more viable applications that transcend the financial. And something like that LVMH example, right? Like with things and products where provenance and ownership matters, once you abstract away the complexity and say that, hey, every luxury good out there now has some kind of a chip embedded in it, and all you need to do is download a simple app and use the near field communication in your smartphone, hold it near the bag. It will tell you if it's authentic or not. No MetaMask, no private keys. The infrastructure we've been talking about this whole hour is fundamental to that working. It's just like, if I need to send a text message, I don't think about how the different web servers and data centers and wireless, Verizon antennas work. I just send a text message. We're still a long way away from where using blockchain-enabled solutions have that level of user-friendliness.
Yeah, so it's the user friendliness. What else?
Figuring out more new models that make sense. So one of the ideas that we discussed the last time I was on here, and I explore a lot in the book, is like, can we decentralize platforms like Uber or Twitter? And there are many good reasons to want to do that, just because I think the one thing we can all agree on is trust is fairly low in these centralized solutions. However, I know many people who have been trying to build something like decentralized social media, and none of them have gained significant traction, not even close. That could mean they haven't figured out the usage model, they haven't figured out the token model. It could also mean that society is not quite ready yet.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this last time. I think a big problem there is they're too focused on the money and not the tool. Like nobody used Instagram because they could monetize it. People used it because, oh, here's a nifty place I can not only store photos, but use filters on my photos. And then the tool showed them, oh, but there's also a social network around this. That's kind of cool. And so the tool brought them to the social network.
Yeah.
And so I think the philosophy, there's a philosophy to crypto, just like there's a philosophy to social media, which, crypto has not adopted the philosophy of social media yet is the problem.
And
they focus so much on the money.
Right. And you can extrapolate that to many other things. Like I've had a lot of conversations with people in the gaming industry, because there was this hot minute in the last year where some of these blockchain-enabled games where the in-game currency is a cryptocurrency and every asset is an NFT, they really took off, and there was a lot of usage, and the valuations of the coins and NFTs went sky high. But in conversations with people I know who have worked in the video game industry for years, every one of them said the same thing. They said, none of this is sustainable because these games are not fun. And one of the reasons they're not fun is
my kids don't play any of those.
Right. And sure enough, like volumes have fallen off a cliff and token prices have crashed. And I think this is a point that, and it's hard. It's really hard to make a fun video game. It turns out it's one of the hardest things to do. It takes years. It takes a lot of money and a lot of people. And then to want to do that with the various blockchain-y accoutrements like NFTs will be even harder. I think people will eventually crack that code, but we're probably nowhere close to it today.
One thing that does strike me as creating ease of use is Ethereum, the upcoming Ethereum 2.0. And I think the big tension in the entire crypto world, including the price of Bitcoin, but definitely the price of Ethereum, is is this Ethereum 2.0 just delayed? Is it not going to happen as some people think? Is it really going to make a difference in scalability or fees or supply and demand? I think there's a lot of people who either haven't done the research or don't understand. But like, what's your view on this?
I believe Ethereum, the merge to, the Ethereum 2.0 is actually a misnomer, and the Ethereum Foundation is trying to get away from it. It's not an event, right? It's a series of steps that take years to implement, and they all get delayed. So, the things that will happen, I think the merge to proof of stake will happen, but there is a misconception that that means transaction fees will go down and capacity will go up. Neither of those things will happen. The carbon footprint of Ethereum will go down, and what then happens is the evolution to the next steps in the roadmap with things like layer 2 solutions and sharding that will then eventually mean transaction fees go down and scale goes up.
Well, transaction fees might go down simply because the cost of mining will go down.
The thing with
There's no electric bill.
that's true, actually. There will be no electric bill in proof of stake. However, actually, because the Ethereum community is sort of decentralization first, they have opted not to take the kinds of shortcuts that other proof of stake blockchains have to have lower transaction fees. For example, simple thing, what's the size of a block? The simplest way to increase capacity and decrease fees is to make blocks bigger. Now you can cram more transactions into a single block. When you start doing that, though, it just, for various reasons I won't get into, the system becomes more centralized. Bitcoin has decided not to go that route. Ethereum has decided not to go that route. But most other proof of stake blockchains, one of the reasons their transaction fees are a lot lower than Ethereum is because they have gone that route.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what about, I guess scalability is also affected by the size of the block. But again, you could have like layer 2 or layer 3 solutions, which, to your point, I guess it's a little more centralized when some other authority takes Ethereum and processes transactions differently.
So this is going back to the beginning of our conversation. One of the important lessons that comes from the history of trust is that hierarchies are very important in building trust, right? That's why the government is hierarchical, court systems are hierarchical. And it's this idea that if you make things into these different layers, then all the people in one layer will trust each other more if they're accountable to a higher layer. And then it goes from there. Right? So simple example, right? Like the US court system, you have lower level courts, then there's the appeals court, then there's the Supreme Court. And the judges in the middle, it's like they don't want to get overruled by the Supreme Court. That's what makes them better judges. And then it comes downhill. The entire financial system, whether it's payments, the movement of dollars is extremely hierarchical. Or securities, like how the sausage making of stock trading actually works, which I thought was very fascinating. So I wrote about it in the book. It's all very hierarchical. And one of the great ironies is that crypto is going that route with these layer 2s, where what you're going to end up happening is, like you and I, if we have a small courts, if we have a disagreement over $1,000, we're not going to go to the Supreme Court. Right? We're going to go to small claims court. Doing anything on layer 1 Bitcoin.
But then I'm appealing.
Right, exactly. Well, if you're unhappy with the results or there is a possibility of corruption, then yeah, you appeal. That's the idea. You have that optionality, which then leads to it's sort of like a disbursement of trust based on how much someone needs it for a particular application. So part of the problem on Ethereum and Bitcoin right now is they're so secure that you can safely send a $1 billion transaction and not have to think twice about it. The problem is a lot of people are using them not to send $1 billion transactions, but they're also sending $10 transactions on the same infrastructure as $1 billion transactions. So this is like saying, let's have the Supreme Court look at extreme cases like Roe v. Wade, but then also Omid and James's small claims dispute, right? That's a poor allocation of resources. What layer 2s do is introduce a hierarchy where smaller, less valuable transactions that don't need as much security but want cheaper fees will happen on layer 2s. And then 1,000 small transactions will be batched and netted down into one recording, and that will be written on layer one. But the people that want the assurances of layer one or are actually sending $1 billion worth of crypto, they'll keep transacting on layer one.
Yeah. So I guess what's your prediction? Ethereum, yes or no?
Yes, I actually think because it's about trust, and trust has these massive economies of scale. There are these great winner take all tendencies with trust that things that are trustworthy become more trustworthy, at least in the short term, and consume more and more users. And this is why, like, the biggest banks are really, really big. And the biggest social media platforms are really, really big. I think crypto will go that route. So in that sense, I am something of like what people call an Ethereum maxi. I think there are right now, like, I don't know, 50 different of these smart contract token platforms. From a trust standpoint, I think it's better if we have $1 trillion platform someday than 10, $100 billion platforms. So I think there will be Ethereum, there will be many layer twos, and there might be room for like one or two blockchains that are totally different.
So I guess first off, to close this, I wanna quote your book. I thought there was this really excellent quote that you quoted from your book from Upton Sinclair, who said that it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. So that applies to like all these pundits and bankers and so on. Like their salary depends on not understanding Ethereum and Bitcoin and crypto and so on. And I think your book, Re-Architecting Trust, The Curse of History and the Crypto Cure for Money, Markets, and Platforms by Omid Malekan. So people should look it up, Re-Architecting Trust by Omid Malekan. I think your book basically explains things in such a way that people no longer have to listen to the people whose salary depends on not explaining this to you. So everything is like a negative or a double negative. But Omid, thanks once again for helping me understand crypto a little bit further. I think there's always, no matter how much you know, this is one of those topics where no matter how much you know, there's always room to learn more. And I think it's really important on every level to understand how to simply explain these concepts that are so game changing, because they're not going to change the game until they get more simple, as we've just been talking about. And simply explaining it is the first step in that. So I appreciate that you wrote this book and that you've been coming on the podcast to continue explaining it.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. The learning bit applies to me as much as it does to the audience. And it is through conversations like this that I actually figure out what I don't know and what I need to go and learn.
Oh, well, I'll keep asking you questions. So, and if you haven't heard Omid yet on Wall Street Insane, which is Omid, me, and our third wheel, Dan Kelly, talking about the most insane experiences we've ever had on Wall Street in the past 20 years, check that sub-series out on the James Altucher Show. But Omid, once again, author of Re-Architecting Trust, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Powered by Snapdragon, the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra elevates your photography to epic new heights. Snapdragon processors deliver a color experience like no other, with sharp, industry-leading 8K video capture. You can also snap images in 200 megapixels, capturing more detail than ever. And those late-night blurry pics are a thing of the past, thanks to next-level night mode. Experience powerfully moving premium photography, only with Snapdragon. Follow us on Instagram at Snapdragon Official.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.